If you have ever felt like no matter how much you understand yourself, the anxiety, the self doubt, or the heaviness still comes back, this episode is for you because the reason you still feel stuck has nothing to do with intelligence, awareness, or effort. It starts much earlier. Welcome to Breakthrough Weekly. I'm your host, Monica Pelayo. Every week, we go beneath the surface of what's keeping you stuck, not the symptoms, but where it actually started. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for being back. Today's episode is titled, Why You Still Feel Stuck Even When You Know Better. Let's begin. I remember laying in the hospital on one of those narrow rollaway beds, night after night, 5 nights in a row. I was exhausted, sobbing silently so no one would hear me. My heart was racing, my chest tight, my body unable to rest even when I tried. There's this overwhelming feeling of helplessness. No matter how much I insisted, nothing was changing. I wanted my dad to accept the care he needed so he could get the treatment and surgery, but he was refusing everything. I knew what that meant, and underneath all of it, I felt like I was failing. It was too much, the emotional pain, the anxiety, everything happening at once. And underneath all of it, I knew I was already starting to grieve. There was even a part of me that felt angry. Not because I didn't love him, but because I did. I wanted him to keep fighting. I wanted him to stay, but I could feel how holding on to that was only hurting me more. So I needed somewhere for it to go. I remember praying, asking God to hold what I could no longer carry, asking for peace, for relief, and for the strength to move through what I was feeling. And in that moment, I let go of everything that was out of my control. I stopped blaming myself for something I couldn't control. I surrendered my dad and the pain I was carrying to God. And part of the reason I was able to do that was because I understood something clearly. Even with everything I know, even as a hypnotherapist, you cannot make someone do something they don't want to do. Have you ever tried to think your way out of anxiety? Told yourself to stop worrying, to look on the bright side, to just be grateful for what you have? Have you made lists, read the books, gone to therapy, repeated the affirmations and still felt like something underneath never really moved? What you're experiencing isn't a lack of effort, it's a pattern that hasn't been changed at the level where it was created. What's happening is that your mind is running a program that was written a long time ago. And until that program is actually rewritten, not managed, not worked around, a change at the source, it will keep running no matter how much you consciously want things to be different. Everything you believe about yourself, about your worth, your capabilities, your place in this world is not something you were born with. You came into this world without those beliefs. You were curious, open, unafraid. Think about a baby learning to walk. They fall, they bump into things, they hurt themselves, and they get back up and try again without once telling themselves, maybe I'm just not meant to walk. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe something is wrong with me. They don't have that voice yet. They're pure forward motion, pure curiosity, pure trust in what their body's trying to do. Somewhere along the way, that changed for most of us. Experiences happened, people said things or didn't say things. Moments occurred where we were too young to understand the full picture, too young to know that what was happening around us said everything about the adults in our lives and nothing about our worth, but we didn't know that then. So we did what the mind does. We took what happened and we made it mean something about who we are. That meaning became a belief. This is exactly what was happening to me in the hospital room. The feeling of failure wasn't new. It was something I had learned to feel a long time ago, long before that moment ever happened. By the time you're an adult, that belief has been living in you for so long, reinforced so many times, confirmed in so many moments, that it no longer feels like a belief, it feels like a fact, like just the way things are or who you are. And the mind makes sure it stays that way. Think of your belief system like a program running in the background of a computer. The moment that program was installed, it began doing one thing: scanning for confirmation that what it believes is true. Every interaction, every relationship, every moment something goes wrong, the program runs its search. Does this confirm what I believe? If yes, it gets filed, stored, added to the pile of evidence. If no, it gets ignored, dismissed, exits without being processed. This is why you can have people in your life who love you, who show up for you, who tell you that you're enough, and some part of you simply cannot take it in. It is not stubbornness. It is not self sabotage for the sake of it. It is a program doing exactly what it's built to do. The mind is extraordinarily loyal to what it learned early, and it will filter your entire experience of life through the lens of what it already believes. In the hospital room, even with all the inner work and training I had done as a hypnotherapist, I could still feel an old pattern rising. A past version of me would have blamed myself more. I would have carried the weight of everything that was happening as if it was mine to fix. I would have been completely consumed by it. That old feeling of responsibility and failure was still there, but this time I was aware of it while it was happening. I could see it, the thought, feel the emotion, and recognize it for what it was: something I had learned, not something that was true. And instead of letting it take over, I caught myself before I could completely spiraled into it. I reminded myself what was actually mine to carry and what wasn't. That didn't remove the grief, it didn't remove the pain, but it changed how I moved through it. That's when the emotional charge shifts, not by forcing different thoughts, but by changing what the mind had learned to believe. That is why knowing better does not automatically mean feeling better. You can understand intellectually that you are worthy. You can repeat it to yourself every morning. You can build an entire conscious case for why your life is good and still feel the anxiety, the heaviness, and the same patterns. Because the belief lives deeper than where those words can reach. In the hospital room, I knew logically what was happening. I knew what needed to be done, and still, I felt like I was failing. And it wasn't just internal. In those moments, my mom would question the decision I was making and how I was taking care of him. It would hurt. It opened the same feeling of not doing enough, of not doing it right, even though I was doing everything I could. Later, when she was the one caring for him, she experienced how difficult it actually was. She couldn't get him to eat or follow through with what he needed either. And a part of me felt that shift. Now you understand. But even then, she remained in denial about his mental state. And that continued to make everything harder to navigate. Even knowing what I knew, the feelings still showed up. That is exactly what this work taught me. Understanding where a belief comes from does not make you immune to it. It just changes what you do when it rises. And this is exactly the kind of belief I later learned to work with, not by trying to think differently in the moment, but by going back to where that feeling was first learned and changing the meaning attached to it. But first, I want you to understand why that feeling keeps coming back at all. Because that feeling in the hospital didn't start there. It was familiar. My mind already knew it. There is something else happening that most people don't realize. Every time you revisit a painful memory, replaying it, turning it over, feeling the emotions rise up again, your brain does not experience that as remembering something from the past. It experiences it as if it's happening right now. The nervous system responds as if the event is occurring in this moment. The emotions are real, the pain is real, the body responds in real time. This is why grief can feel as raw years later as it did on the first day. If the memory keeps getting reopened, this is why certain songs, certain smells, certain situations can throw you back into a feeling you thought you were over. The brain does not distinguish between then and now when a memory is actively being experienced. If you have a painful belief like, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, I'm not safe, and you keep returning to memories that confirm it, keep feeling the same emotions attached to it, keep living inside the story, your nervous system is not healing. It is relieving over and over. It's like a wound that is trying to heal, a scab begins to form, and then something triggers the memory again, and you pick the scab off. The wound reopens, the pain is fresh, and the healing has to start over. You're not stuck because you're doing something wrong. You're stuck because the wound has not been resolved at the level where it was created. This is the part I want you to really sit with, especially if you have tried things before and felt like nothing ever truly changed. Coping strategies, positive thinking, pushing through, these are not without value. They help you function, they give you tools to manage difficult moments, but they work on the surface. They address what you can see above the ground. Imagine a weed growing in your garden. You could cut it off at the top. It looks like it's gone. For a while, things feel better, calmer, more manageable, but the root is still there, underneath the surface, untouched. And eventually, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, it grows back because the foundation was never removed. This is what happens when we only work with the symptoms. We trim what's visible, we develop strategies to cope with the anxiety, to push through the fear, to talk ourselves out of the depression when it shows up. And those strategies can work until the next trigger, the next hard season, the next time life puts pressure on the exact spot where the root lives. The weed grows back. The only way it doesn't grow back is when you go to the root. This is the work I do in hypnosis, not forcing change or overriding the mind, but accessing where the belief was formed and updating it at that level. When you find the original belief, the memory it came from, and change the meaning attached to it, that's when something real shifts at the source. That is completely different kind of work, and it produces a completely different kind of result. One of the biggest fears people have when it comes to hypnosis is control. The idea that someone could make you do something, think something, or change something without your consent. But if that were possible, I would have been able to do it in the moment, and I couldn't, because no one has that kind of control over another human being. Not in a hospital room, not in real life, and not in hypnosis. What I couldn't do for my dad in that room is exactly what I cannot do for a client in a session. The change has to come from within. Hypnosis does not override your will, it works with your mind, not against it. You are aware, you are present, and you're choosing. Nothing changes unless some part of you is ready for it to change. When the belief itself changes, not just the behavior on top of it, but the actual meaning stored in the memory that created it, everything built on that belief begins to shift. The program stops scanning for the old confirmation, the filter changes. You start noticing things you generally could not see before, not because they weren't there, but because your mind was not built to receive them. People who love you, moments that prove your worth, evidence that life can be different. I experienced this shift myself first. And then I began to see the same pattern with clients who carried anxiety for decades. Fear that had been there so long it felt like a personality trait. Depression that had become the background noise of everyday life. And when we went to the root, found the belief, found where it was formed, and changed the meaning attached to it, something fundamental began to shift. At first, the old pattern can still show up. The mind may try to go back to what it knows, but it no longer holds the same power because what was generating the symptoms has changed. The need to constantly manage them begins to fade. And over time, what once felt automatic starts to feel unfamiliar and far less controlling. The part of me that wanted to take responsibility for everything, the part that felt like I couldn't fix it, I was feeling. But this time I was aware of it while it was happening. This is not about positive thinking, it is about going to the place where the belief actually lives and doing the work there. The anxiety, the depression, the fear, the feeling of not being enough, none of it was there when you arrived in this world. It was learned, it was installed through experiences that happened before you had the ability to understand them fully. Through moments where you made meaning out of the pain the only way a young mind knows how. That means it is not who you are, it's what you learned. And what was learned can be unlearned. What was installed can be changed. The program can be rewritten. You don't have to keep living inside a story that was written from a younger version of you, one who didn't yet have the context to see it clearly. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, this loop of understanding what to do but still feeling stuck, that's the work. Not more effort, not more discipline. The belief underneath what you keep experiencing. I offer a complimentary exploratory call where we can talk about what's been showing up for you and whether this work is the right fit. You can book your call at thethrivingpathways.com/appointment. You don't have to keep managing what can actually be healed. If something in this episode felt familiar, not just as a story, but as a pattern you recognize in your own life, that recognition matters. The subconscious doesn't surface what it isn't ready to be seen. If it came up, it's worth paying attention to. Thank you for spending this time with me. If someone came to mind while you were listening, that's not a coincidence. Send this episode to them. New episodes drop every Monday. Subscribe so you don't miss next week's Breakthrough Weekly. I'm Monica Pelayo. I'll see you next time.